Let's go beyond the connection. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a very interesting guest. We have on Javed Ikbal. Now, Javed, you are the CISO at Bright Horizons. You've been a CISO for over 20 years. And I think you told me you have a specialty in coming in and being the first CISO in an organization and having to lay the groundwork and the engineering for how you put security in place in the organization. That gives you a really big background. It's interesting. I asked you if there was anything that personally in your life that you wanted to share, just so we could get to know you a little bit better. And one of the things that you said is you like to break things. So I'm going to let you explain that because I'd love to have you maybe before we get started here, expand a little bit on your background. And then we're going to get into the topic, which is aligning expert or executive perspectives, maybe is a better way to put it, to strengthen corporate security. Like, how do we get alignment basically throughout the organization, especially from leadership, behind what we're doing on the network? But I'll let you get into your background.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. The break things is interesting because I was that child who took radios and clocks apart to figure out how they worked. And obviously, once I did that, they did not work anymore. But I learned it the hard way the first time, like in a wind-up clock, the spring sprang away. And even I are old enough to know what that means. My kids don't know because they're used to digital clocks all over the place. Fast forward a bit, my undergraduate education was mechanical engineering. And I found out that one of the very important things that engineers do is to conduct what's called a failure mode analysis. If you are building a machine or if you are building a bridge, you have to analyze at what point that machine or that bridge will fail, meaning when it will break. And then you say, okay, no more than 50 semi-trucks on that bridge at a time. Or do not run this machine at above 20,000 RPM. Do not take it beyond the red line if you're thinking of cars, because you will do permanent damage. And then I meandered and stumbled into a career in information security. I realized that the same principles work. If you conduct a failure mode analysis on your environment, you can figure out where things can break. And then you make sure you put in safeguards so the situation doesn't get to that point. So I like to break things, but to the point where I'm figuring out where things will break. In information security, the formal name for this is threat modeling. You look at a system or a system of systems, and you look at all the threats that can compromise that system, and you put in safeguards. A different way of looking at failure mode analysis, but the principle is the same.
So I have to ask you, because we're going to talk a lot about security, keeping networks up, running, resilient, fast. There's a mentality amongst most business people, and especially executives, that it's not necessarily the more the data, the better, but we know we get more and more data. Our networks are flooded with data, and the data is just going to get larger. The amount of data that we're collecting in the Internet of Things world that we're working in, data and the amount that it's going to be coming into and operating on our networks is just going to keep scaling dramatically. However, not all data is good data. One of the things that you and I talked about was that in the world of a CISO, a big part of that is understanding what data do we need? Because just keeping data for the sake of keeping data, just because we can, isn't necessarily a good thing for the organization. And I thought maybe we could just start out right there, because I know there's a lot of us in terms of the business executives that are listening to this right now. I think we have to have our expectations kind of reset. And I'd love to have your perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the foundational principles of security is called the principle of least privilege, which means do not give people access to resources, meaning data or systems or networks or even buildings that they do not need access to. So for example, I'm the CISO at my current organization. I do not have access to many of our systems. And people are surprised that, like, I go request someone for something from one of those systems, and they might ask me, hey, shall we give you access? No, we need that separation. So, zooming out a bit from that, it's not just that access to that data, if it's also not having unnecessary data at all. And that word unnecessary has big quotes around it. What I consider necessary versus what the privacy officer considers necessary and what the CMO considers necessary are three different sets of data. Not always, but many times, because the CMO might say, I need every piece of information about every person we ever contact with, and I want to retain it forever. And the privacy officer will come and say, no, there are these laws against this. And even if you have this data, you cannot share it, you cannot sell it, you need to give people the opportunity to opt out of that. My worldview is slightly different. It's adjacent to the privacy officers, but a little bit to the side, is that if we keep that data, again, the failure mode slash break analysis, what's the worst that can happen to that data? If someone comes in unauthorized and steals that data, or even if one of our people lose a laptop with that data on it, what are the things that can potentially happen? So to me, I like a bare bones system, only what we absolutely need, given what business wants to accomplish. So the CMO has to come with a concrete plan saying, we are going to keep this data and we'll use it this way. And then we'll put it through the security and privacy filters to see if that works or not. I'll digress for a moment. I saw this meme the other day. A son comes in and tells his dad, hey, dad, I'm almost done building my machine, but I need this 3/4 inch piece of wood that's exactly 18 inches long. And the dad says, oh, I know it. I've been saving a piece like that since 1981. So dad goes into this warehouse of small pieces of cut wood in various shapes and forms, and he pulls out the exact piece. That does not work in security. That does not work in privacy. The marketing team cannot keep that data because we will use that data sometime in the uncertain future. We have to have a plan. If not, we have to retire that data. Companies have been breached and they had customer passport images or driver's license images stolen, credit cards numbers stolen. They had absolutely no reason to keep those, but someone just thought, hey, it would be good to keep them. One last point about that, storage is now dark cheap. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people were conscious about storage cost and they optimized everything. And I think one of the downsides of cheap storage is that, oh, sure, we'll keep this data forever.
You know, that it's one of two big areas and topics that I wanted to talk to you about because, yeah, more data is not good data. And the other thing, too, is you mentioned it. There is a proliferation of people and devices that want access to the network. And there's also a proliferation of ISP that we have coming into the network. There's more access points from more people, from more devices, over more ISPs than ever before. And that's
Yeah.
not changing. That's got to create a big headache for you. How do you think about, like, how do you address that, knowing that is a business condition that will only accelerate?
So we conduct these impact assessments. We call it a privacy assessment, but you can also look at the security. I'll give you a specific example. If you go to an e-commerce website and if you buy something, a large enough site is probably using something called a session recorder. From the moment you land on that web page, every single thing you do, they have a video of it. and they can play it back. It's like a flight data record, but it's not recording data. They are seeing you hesitate over some widget that you might consider buying and you did not click on it, but they actually know that you hesitated over that email. So you will be bombarded with emails and advertisements over the next few months. That's just one example. Companies are recording 30-minute web browsing sessions every pixel, and they can play it back. Now they're using AI to analyze that. They're trying to do intent analysis, trying to figure out why did that person pause here? Was it accidental or they were really looking at it? And if they could, they would also record your eyeball to see what you are looking at. This proliferation will continue. There's only one thing that will stop it, which is regulations, which are not going to come. Privacy and security needs to step up and educate their internal stakeholders again on the principle of least privilege. Do not keep data that you do not need just because it's available.
So the idea here, where I want to go next, is it's a trend in the industry and it's not stopping either. We keep talking about things like trade data trends and access trends, and one of the big trends is a wireless first network trend. And wireless first, whether it's internally within our corporate locations or externally, as we have most companies are multi-location in urban areas and rural areas, and so wireless connections are really important. In fact, there was a guest on the show that he worked at Google at one point, and Google wanted to make sure there was two connections to every desktop. So there was a redundancy of failure to everybody that was working in the company. He was lobbying really heavily that it had to be, the second had to be wireless. And it was not only a big cost savings because it wasn't another wired connection. That there's this massive cost savings, but the trend is wireless and greater incorporation into our networks. I know that you've thought significantly about this and have solved for the wireless trend in the industry. I wanted to talk to you, A, how important is wireless to our networks today? How does it impact corporate security? And what have you done about it?
So I'll start with one positive about wireless. If corporations can stop cabling their offices with Cat 6 or Cat 7 Ethernet cables, they can save a lot of money, provided that they have sufficient wireless infrastructure to serve everyone. That's part one. That part is fine to me as a security person. But to have both a cabled Ethernet connection and a wireless connection live at the same time to the same endpoint poses security risk. So we actually prevent our endpoints from connecting to two separate networks at the same time. It doesn't matter whether it's wired or wireless or not. Because, and I'll give you one example why this is dangerous. Let's say I am a threat actor, I am an insider threat. My work laptop allows me to connect to a wired network and a wireless network at the same time. So my office is sufficiently close to the window. I connect to the company's Ethernet network and I connect to a wireless network run by my accomplice who's sitting in the parking lot. Now I have bypassed the millions of dollars in firewalls that my company spent on, and I have breached an external unauthorized malicious network to my internal network. I will need some software on my computer to be able to bridge those two networks. But again, if I am not constrained by least privilege, I have blown through all the network perimeter security measures in place. So those are the two pros and cons. Stepping back a little bit, for certain locations where broadband cable network is not available, 5G or gigabit wireless site-to-site gigabit wireless, or even something like Starlink or other satellite internet services can be a very useful thing. At some of our locations, we do use 5G for various reasons. Even if broadband is available, we cannot bring that in, or it's simply not available.
So wireless is here to stay. Here's what I'm trying to understand all of this, all the policies and your point of view. How important is it that you have buy-in from executive leadership? Like, how important is getting the greater team on board and understanding what you're talking about?
About wireless or security in general.
Security in general.
So I will say this, I have this view about security that the tone from the top and the buy-in is the most valuable thing a CISO can have. If you do not have sufficient number of employees, or if you don't have the right budget, you can still do the basics, or at a minimum, voice your concern. Now, if there's no one paying attention to your concerns, or if you are not supported adequately, it is time to update the resume and move on, because you will accomplish exactly nothing at this point.
So is it an issue of the importance of the data, or is it an issue of understanding the threat that lack of security has? Like in this day and age, we're in 2025. Why would we not have a CEO or other executives in the CIO completely on board with everything you're recommending? Why would there be any challenge in that?
I am very fortunate that I have not faced that, but I will give you a slightly long answer. Some CISOs take this approach that the CISO's job is security and security only. The formal name for this is the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Go mention this to a typical CEO, and the CEO understands confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You may have to explain. But even then, the CEO's world is to increase shareholder value, make the revenue go up, make the costs go down, increase the profit margin, keep everyone happy. Unless you are framing confidentiality, integrity, and availability in that lens, the CEO is probably not going to pay attention because she or he is very busy. So I frame my job not in terms of the CIA triad, but revenue, reputation, and regulation. And my job is I am the revenue protection officer. My formal title is Chief Information Security Officer, but my job is to protect the revenue, protect the reputation, and protect us from applicable regulations. When I explain it like that, I do not have to explain it any further to the C-suite because that's their world. That's what they live and breathe. And I have just framed my problems in their language. I think that's where a lot of disconnect happens between the head of security and the rest of the executive management.
So it's interesting because as a business, we do a lot to understand our customers and speak in their language. And what you're saying is you have internal customers.
Absolutely. They're my first customers.
Absolutely. If you're not understanding them and their language and how they filter all the strategic decisions that they're making about the business, that's very
Yeah.
astute. It's very astute. I want to ask another question, and this is how important is security not only to protecting revenue and reputation, but I think even still in today's world, there's a net, on average, networks in the business world go down once or twice a month. Still in with all the advances in technology and everything that we have. How would you balance that with like how much of that is related to a security breach? How much is that related to a hardware issue? Like From your protection of the data, how important is security to the protection of the network and keeping it up and running and resilient?
Okay. After saying that I don't frame things using the CIO triad, I will come back to that. So this is now we are down to the brass tacks and talking about technical approach to security. The A in the CIA is availability. Availability means the right data and the right resources available at the right time. So if my systems are up at 3 a.m. but down at 9 a.m. East Coast time, that's not very helpful. So again, right resources at the right time, and we plan for that. We have redundant systems, multiple network paths, even redundant power. We have UPS generators, our data centers feed from two separate substations. And I don't know if you remember this, a couple of months ago, Heathrow Airport was out for 8+ hours, the fifth busiest airport in the world, down for one third of the day because they had power feeds coming in from a single substation. Fire at that substation, Heathrow down, millions of pounds of lost revenue and many thousands of unhappy travelers. So we plan for that. And again, call back to the very first thing I said, failure mode analysis. You look at things that can break and how they break, and where possible, you put in countermeasures so a single thing going down does not take you down. It is not possible all the time to eliminate all the single points of failure. And then our job as security professional is to document that and say, this is the risk. We are choosing this hypothetical data center because it's convenient for us and it's really cheap, but it has a single substation feeding us. And the possibility is that it will go down. It has happened once in the last 20 years. Do we take that risk? And if it goes down, usually it takes one full day to repair. And when you translate that into money, for ease of calculation, I'll use a made up number of $365 million of revenue tied to the data center. So one day outage means we will lose $1 million. If that outage happened once in the last 20 years, can we assume that it will take another 20 years? We really should not, but that's how the calculation works. So we'll say, okay, 1 million by 20 is $50,000. So we are really risking $50,000. So if the next expensive data center is going to cost us $100,000 more, we say we don't move. And maybe the business comes back to us and say, hey, it's not just lost revenue. We'll get this really black eye and our customers will trash us. And say, okay, then the math is easy. If you think your reputation is worth more than $100,000, then we move to the more expensive location. And now this has become a science. There are companies and well-established methodologies established by statisticians and mathematicians who quantify cyber risk, and they will give you a dollar figure. So what I gave you is just one narrow example of resiliency. But you can say, here's the cost, here's the investment needed, and here's the risk. What do we do about it?
And it comes down to a business decision. Absolutely. We've talked about a lot, and our human brains, we can't retain too much information at a time. So I want to ask you a question. For all of the individuals who are watching or listening to this episode, what's the one most important thing that you want us to take away?
So one common saying about security is not if, when it will be breached. Assume for that, build your program to solve for that. If the breach happens, how soon can you detect? How soon can you mitigate? How do you prevent the data from leaving your environment? Those are extremely critical questions to ask. If you answer those, you can back calculate, go in reverse, and design your security program based on that.
So here's what happens. Everyone who comes onto this podcast shares from their perspectives, insights from years and years in the business. And we're all here to protect our data, keep our networks up and running, keep our businesses flowing. It's data that fuels information and knowledge that empowers the people that make things happen. And I just wanted to thank you because you shared some very interesting perspectives today. And one of the biggest things that I took away is that we have to have leadership in order for you to do the things that you need to do. And if you can put it into dollars and cents and translate it into the language of the executive team that is running this company, they're going to look at it as a significant threat that needs significant resources. Because one of the things that happens a lot of the time is that we are under-resourced as a department. And there's unlimited good ideas to implement, but we need the resources to do them. And we need to advocate for those resources. And you talk very specifically about how you can communicate with the team, the executive team, to advocate, to get the resources to do the right things. We're not hired as advocators. We're not hired as internal salespeople, but really that's what you did. And that was one of my big takeaways from today.
And I'll just add one more thing, if I may. So CISOs are also fiscals. From the outside, it may not appear that way, but not only are we protecting the reputation revenue and protecting the organization against regulation violation, we also have to be responsible about the resources given to us. So what do we do with it? Do we make a distinction between the needs and the wants? And I think that's a very important lesson that security professionals should consider, that just because I can ask for the moon, should I ask for the moon? What do I need? Is it ranked appropriately? Am I being careful about things that I need and things that I want? So not only do I have to speak in the language of business, I also have to create these tiers of resources and engage them appropriately.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Here's what I know is going to happen. We're going to have people that have questions. Is it appropriate that I gave out a link to your LinkedIn profile? Because people have questions, they could reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Javed, for coming on and sharing the years of experience and knowledge that you had and sharing that with the community. That is part of the rising tide that lifts all boats. So I just appreciate that you came on and shared that today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.